Hello, I'm Susie Miller from eLaHub, and I'm going to be taking you through some of the key things you need to know about digital accessibility and specifically accessible e-learning. In this video, I'm going to be looking at the question, how can I make e-learning resources accessible? I say looking at rather than answering the question deliberately, because it would be impossible in one video to refer to all of the requirements you need to meet in order to make your e-learning resources accessible. One of the things I found most frustrating when I first started finding out about e-learning accessibility was that there didn't seem to be a single source of truth that could tell me everything I needed to know. I did manage to find lots of information, but I didn't always find it easy to understand or apply, and sometimes it seemed contradictory. Eventually, I realised that the single source of truth was the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which are the internationally recognised standards for digital accessibility produced by the World Wide Web Consortium. So that was great, but the difficulty with these guidelines is that they are aimed primarily at web developers and written in very technical language. For example, they categorise the standards according to 4 principles: perceivable, operable, understandable and robust, which I didn't find very user-friendly or easy to understand. It made much more sense to me to focus instead on the requirements of each of the 4 different types of impairments. And in this video, I'll do just that, and tell you the most important things that you need to do to make your e-learning accessible for learners with each of these types of impairments. Most of the examples I give are legal requirements, so either WCAG A or AA standards, although a few are WCAG recommendations or AAA standards, which are not generally considered legal requirements. You can find out more at eLaHub.net. We give you some great examples of how to meet the most important WCAG requirements using rapid e-learning authoring tools. We also give you recommendations and links to other useful resources to help you improve the usability and accessibility of your e-learning resources. Remember that to comply with legal requirements, particularly the new public sector bodies' accessibility regulations, there are 49 WCAG A and AA standards that you need to be aware of. eLaHub.net can help. Before we look at some examples of how we can adapt our e-learning to make it more accessible for different types of impairments, we'll just recap the 4 categories and look at some examples of each of them. The first category is vision and the second is hearing. The third category is motor, and it's important to realise from a digital accessibility point of view, when we're talking about motor impairments, that we're considering users who cannot use a mouse and so navigate using a keyboard. Our final category is cognitive. Let's move on now and look at some examples for each category. For vision, we have blindness, colour blindness, glaucoma and albinism. For hearing, we have deafness, hearing loss, acoustic trauma and auditory processing disorder. For motor, we have loss or damage of limbs, arthritis, multiple sclerosis, tremors, repetitive strain injury and Parkinson's. And finally, for cognitive differences, we have dyslexia, ADHD, autism, Asperger's, seizures, anxiety, bipolar disorder and second language learners. We'll start with vision, and probably the most important thing we can do to improve the accessibility of all of our digital resources, which is to add alternative text to all visual elements. This is the first of the WCAG 2.1a standards because it's so essential for digital accessibility. The second is to provide transcripts and audio narration for videos. Then we have ensure meaning is not conveyed by colour alone, e.g. green for correct and red for incorrect, which is essential for our colourblind learners. The next standard benefits all of your learners, ensuring that you use high contrast text, visuals and navigation themes. The final standard is to make sure that learners can enlarge the text up to 200% without using assistive technology, so just using the zoom function on their browser. Our next category is hearing. Again, we'll start with one of the most important WCAG standards for this category, which is to provide captions for videos. Although WCAG does not require that they must be closed captions, i.e. captions that you can switch on and off, this is always preferable as it gives the learner more control. The next standard is to provide transcripts for audio and video resources. We then have to allow the user to pause audio or control the volume, and then avoid using background audio behind speech. And our final recommendation is to avoid audio-only instructions or warnings, for example if a question is answered incorrectly. Now we'll move on to motor impairments. Before we start, one thing which is very important to understand when thinking of learners who don't use a mouse is that many of them will use a screen reader to navigate through your e-learning resource. So the first standard requires that you make it easy for the learner to navigate using a screen reader, for example by using header styles. The second standard is also important for screen reader users and requires that you ensure that your content follows a logical structure. You also need to make sure that a learner can use all activities in your resource without using a mouse, only a keyboard. The next standard requires that you allow learners enough time to complete tasks or do not set time limits. And finally, a recommendation, not a standard, is to use inclusive instructions, e.g. select instead of click. And finally, we'll focus on cognitive differences. First of all, you need to provide explanations of complex vocabulary and abbreviations. It's also essential to use clear and consistent navigation. You need to allow your learners to pause or stop or hide any moving elements, as this can cause distractions. The next standard is extremely important as it can lead to seizures. You need to make sure that you do not include any content which flashes more than 3 times per second. And the final recommendation is to use the clearest and simplest language appropriate for the content. This benefits not only learners with cognitive differences, but all of your learners. In this video, I've shown you just a few of the things you need to do in order to make your e-learning more accessible for learners with different types of impairments. Remember that these are only a few examples of the 49 WCAG 2.1A and AA standards that you need to be aware of for legal requirements. To see some examples of how to apply these standards using rapid e-learning authoring tools, or to find out more, visit us at eLaHub.net.